Morning, everybody. Nice to see everybody on this overcast, slightly drizzly, at least here, Jewel morning. Jewel is a white tea, famous white tea from Fujian, which is a little township as well as an area where white tea is famous for growing. So by the end of this session, you'll know more about fooding. You'll know more about Zhenghe. For those of you who haven't looked in your email yet, you'll see a map of Fujian Province, and we'll talk location, and we'll talk relationship to Wui Mountain and a city called Nanping. So we're going to have a lot of geographical features identified by the end of this session. In addition, history. I love history. Second most favorite thing to talk about after long words. So we're going to have a revision of the history I've previously spoken of regarding white tea, because new information has come to light, which seems to indicate that white tea started earlier than what I previously told you. So that's really good news, because as scholars dig into more resource material and come up with more information, it makes it really easy to kind of pinpoint why these changes are occurring. All right, before we jump into all these great things, which will produce a jewel by the end of this session, let's talk about two of you who've done some really interesting things and who have made some interesting observations. So I first want to talk about two of you, one of you, well, actually, it's a pair of you. That's Dylan and Teresa, who commented on Yellow Mountain Reserve. So Yellow Mountain Reserve is a green tea. And their comment was as follows. And it was really, really interesting, because this is an example of why all of you are in the 99th percentile in terms of understanding and appreciation for those of you who've been following for some time. And that is, they commented on how much these days that Yellow Mountain Reserve has a full-bodied flavor. Now, one of the reasons Bijou and I avoided initially getting Yellow Mountain Reserve, even though we loved it right from the start, and this, by the way, is on many people in China's top 10 tea. When we tasted it, we loved it, but we thought, the American palate is heavy. It's heavier than this tea. We just weren't sure whether the American palate would appreciate. So we resisted. And then finally, when we took a group out to Anhui and they tasted it, they said, yeah, it's pretty good. And so the evolution of this is, when Dylan and Teresa first tasted this, it was, in quotes, too light. Not enough flavor. But now over time, especially with scope, they've come to understand, hey, this is great in its full flavor. And we've heard this type of story from many of you over time. And it's, again, what happens when you're exposed to wide scope, when you have the rhythm of how to go through tea. So I congratulate all of you. The second person I want to highlight is Rob Dorfman, because he said the same thing in a different way, because he keeps extensive historical lists of what he drinks, and he rates everything as he drinks it. And what he's mentioned the last few times he's been in here is when he reviews the lists and has the teas again, he notes, hey, my appreciation maybe 2 years ago or a year and a half ago is different than it is today. And so This is again because you have context. When you drink a tea without context, yes, you make an immediate judgment. Yeah, this is pretty good. Okay, I like this one. You like it compared to what? You understand it compared to what? So when you're blind, you don't have any way to really weigh or measure and then come to some sort of conclusion about it. And this is what all of you are getting the opportunity to do. And it's great. We're loving hearing this type of commentary. So congratulations to all of you. I picked these two stories, but many of you have told me many stories, both Bijou and myself, many stories over time. And this is really a reflection of your growth and understanding of tea overall. So again, congratulations. So let's jump right on into Jewel. And let's first talk about that map, because I sent you a map. I'm going to be using all these Chinese names. Let's get you located. So if you'll bring that map up, if you look in the northeast, there's a place called Fuding, Fuding, and it's right on the bay at the top right portion, easternmost portion of the Fujian Province map. So that's one of the key centers. And actually, in China and outside of China, sometimes you hear, oh yeah, Fuding is the birthplace of white tea, or Fuding, I mean, you can only get white tea really from Fuding. It's not true. And by the end of today, you'll know why that's not true. But it is very important to note that that is one of the couple very famous places in Fujian Province for producing white tea. If you go to the west slightly, you'll see a place spelled F-U-apostrophe-A-N, Fuan. Why am I talking about Fuan, and why is it I'm only going to talk about it right now and not the rest of the session? Fuan, we've told you that there are these research institutes that consolidate knowledge about tea and that save ancient varietals of tea. They keep them in gardens. They have experimental gardens there. They create new varietals. There's a key one in Fuan. Fuan is further famous because it makes small batch red teas. And those red teas are fabulous, hard to come by because they're small batch. So again, we're trying to, what I'm talking about today relates to how rich the tea environment is in Fujian Province. If you go to the west further, and then a little bit south, you'll see a place, Z-H-E-N-G-H-E, Zhenghe. So we've talked about Zhenghe before because that's also a huge producer of white tea. When you look and think about white tea in China, there are two places that always come up in tea elite conversations about white tea. One is Fuding and the second is Zhenghe. You have to have both in that conversation. Are they growing the same varietals? No, they're not. They're close, but they're not the same. So that's one of the reasons you have some flavor differences. You certainly have appearance differences. If you go slightly east, you'll then see a third place, which I'm only going to talk about right now and then not come back to. Jianyang, Jianyang. So when you're reading
the west, you mean Jinyang.
Did I say east?
You did.
I meant the west, the other east.
Oh.
Yes. Thank you. This place, when you're reading books about white tea or books about tea, sometimes gets footnoted or even in the main body of the text as also the home of white tea. We can't argue that point. We don't see enough evidence to say that it was kind of a founding father type of place for white tea. On the other hand, throughout history, there has been some mention of Jianyang, and they certainly today grow and produce white tea. But realistically, from the Chinese textual sources, Fuding, Zhenghe, 1 and 2. If you go further west and then a little bit north, you see the Wuishan, W-U-Y-I, and then I think it is S-H-A-N. And that's where the cliff teas, some of the very famous red teas come from. And those of you who've been on the sessions hear that all the time because this is a World Heritage Site. So I'm trying to give you context. There's this, in these latitudes in the north of Fujian Province, you have these famous teas. You have these prominent farmers, prominent farming families that have developed over the years. Let's talk about how many years these families have developed. How long has tea from this area been famous? It's been famous since the Tang Dynasty. Let's get ourselves situated in history so we know where we are. Tang Dynasty started in about 618 and ended in about 960. So even during that period, these places were being written about. Why? Because these places were starting to send to the emperor every year during springtime these tribute teas. And they belong to areas, particularly Zhenghe belonged to an area called the Northern Bay. The name doesn't really matter. It's a northern Fujian area where tea was famous. And they sent tribute tea to the emperor, and he looked for that tea every year because it was really good. So tea from this area, I want to ask you this question. Was tea from this area, when they sent it to the emperor in the year, in between the years 618 and 960, was it really white tea? Did it have that really characteristic of lightly oxidized tea? The answer would be no. This is a trick question. We know that in terms of style of tea, at least as far as we can tell from historical sources, there was nothing but green tea all the way up into the Ming Dynasty. So Ming Dynasty, let's place you again historically where you should be, 1368 to about 1635, something like that, give or take a year or two here and there. So up until that time, no such thing as anything outside of green tea. And basically, again, to get everybody up to speed, green tea was being steamed to stop oxidation until about the year 1000 or 1100, where it then became fried. And in Japan, when they learned the craft of tea and took tea back to Japan in 772, they learned the craft of how to steam. And because there was a break in the relationship between Japan and China, they never realized, or they didn't realize until much later, that, hey, Chinese have changed. They're frying the tea to stop the oxidation instead of steaming. So the Japanese refined until today. They're some of the best steamers in the world, but the principle is the same. Apply heat, stop the enzymatic process of oxidation. White tea, true white tea, according to today's standards, what is it again? You pick, you wither, you separate by grade, and then you sell. Basically, that's it. So you're not doing anything in a big way to immediately bring a halt to oxidation. Let's remind ourselves, how do we oxidize a banana? We peel it, we expose it to oxygen in the air. Apple, same thing. You bite into it, take a bite out, ooh, the inside's exposed to the air, it turns brown. How do you oxidize a tea leaf? You damage it in some way. And damage sounds negative. You bruise it in some way, either on purpose or with white tea, maybe you picked it and you squeezed a little bit, so you started an oxidation process. By sun drying, and most of the best white tea in the world is sun dried, you slow that process down greatly. So white tea is very lightly oxidized. It is not rolled. It's basically sun-dried or low-fired oven cooked. Why would you use one form of heating and draining the moisture out of the tea leaves versus another form? It's called weather. If it's raining or dewy or foggy consistently during a period, hey, farmer says, okay, I'm gonna low fire dry this, bake it. If that sun is out, why would I do that? I'll just lay it out because I'm set up to expose that to the sun. And usually it takes about 2 weeks, somewhere in that range, to go ahead and actually complete the process of drawing that moisture out. So historically, we see that even though the emperor in the 12th century, in the Sung dynasty, wrote an article about tea where he talked about white tea, was this emperor referring to the white tea process? And we know the answer is he could not have been, because there's zero evidence of any process that we currently understand as white tea going on in that period. It was all green tea processing at that time. So was the emperor just mistaken? Did he wake up one morning and say, you know, I'm the emperor. I can call green tea white tea if I want, and then write an article about it? The answer is no. After real and thorough textual research, what the emperor was referring to, because, by the way, in the text where the emperor wrote about white tea, was the cryptic remark that humans cannot create it. Now, in a God sense, yes, humans can't create tea. But I don't think that that emperor was speaking God or Buddha or Taoism in that sense at all. In fact, what that emperor 99.9% was referring to was the fact that through an albino mutation in certain plants, you had leaves that were white color, but they were being treated as green tea, but the leaves were white color. And the most famous of those is, and probably the tea that he was actually referring to, was a tea from Anhui. And it is actually called, even though it's done as a green tea, Anji green tea. Anji white tea. That's what it's called, but it's not white tea. It isn't that process of white tea. And the emperor, when he wrote white, was just referring to the color. And the kicker to it all was he said, cannot be created by humans. Because at that time, we didn't have the science to create those mutations, or we weren't using the science to create those mutations. So this begs the question, we're going along, we're doing green tea, and we're doing it up to 1368, we know for sure. And all of a sudden, there comes an impetus sometime between 1368 and 1635 to develop other styles of tea. What was that impetus? Well, the emperor who founded the Ming Dynasty came in 1368, right away, writes an edict. First words in the edict, hear and obey. And the edict basically said, okay, folks, no more tea cakes. And that's almost like what we did here in the early 1900s when we created prohibition. Because as soon as you create a forbidden, we're humans. Everywhere, every place, we're created. That's human nature. So farmers started experimenting. Now, it took them a long time to actually develop a white tea process. Previously, I told you that probably in the 1850s, white tea was first developed. That's wrong. We now have very excellent evidence that as early as 1795 or 1796, in Fujian and in Zhenghe, and it's hard to understand exactly why in both places, except they're close enough that you could have had monks going back and forth between both places, and that's likely what happened, that we have descriptions of what they were doing, which indicate it was by white tea. Different varietals, but close enough that, and the process was close enough, wasn't exactly the same, but it was close enough that the end result was a lightly oxidized tea. And as it turns out, was mostly not leaving the local area, mostly consumed by local people. You get down to 1851, new varietal develops in Fujian, farmer develops a new varietal in Fujian. As you get down to about 1880, 1881, you start to see in the Western market a little bit of white tea. How did you see that in the Western market? Did you go to the tea stall in Britain and walk in? Oh, there's some white tea. Gosh, they forgot to cook that. The answer is no. When they were, and remembering, most of the tea that was being exported in the 1800s was red tea, right? There was some cliff tea, some oolong tea that was being exported, but predominantly it was red tea, what you call black tea. So how all of a sudden did white tea start showing up in the markets? It started showing up in the markets because for the top grade red tea, especially by the time you got to the 1890s, farmers started, and producers started putting silver needle on top because those fat buds were beautiful, and putting them on the top of high grade red tea, oh my gosh, look. And it was a selling point for this tea. And it was then shortly thereafter that some Westerners said, hey, you know, can you send me some of that long white bud without the red tea? And so by the 1900s, Zhenghe and Fujian were producing quite a lot of white tea. In fact, between 1912 and 1916, they were producing 1,000 tons each per year. Most of it was exported. Russia loved that stuff. US got some. Germany got a lot. It's just changed the ballgame. Now, World War I was very inconvenient because World War I, as it developed, started to hurt the tea market overall. And let's see, I'm getting a sense, oh, Tea Master signaling that she's thirsty, which means you're all thirsty. So, story interrupted right here, as it should have actually stopped 10 minutes ago, but you know me. And it is my great pleasure to bring up the Tea Master to demonstrate. So for those of you who are new on the broadcast, she will first demonstrate the brewing of Jewel, and you have Jewel in your box, in your bag, marked bag number 1. And she'll demonstrate, and then you'll brew with her the second time. So without further ado, or stories, here is Bijou.
Yes. Hi, good morning. 早上好。We do 白茶啊，so white tea 白茶。So okay. So this tea 呢，防护的壶顶啊，壶顶拿正盒，或者是still we have 正盒 too, but this 是壶顶啊。Okay, I usually use 3.
So you see her tap
Yeah.
3 cups. You don't have to use 3 cups. If you just use 2, that's fine. But you use 3 because it's faster to dissipate steam and aerate the water. And in addition to the 3 cups, tea tray, tea toy, tea strainer. What is it you must have? 2 cups and the tea strainer. All the other stuff you don't have to have. It's fun to have. But you can do 3. No, that's no problem. Do 3. Go ahead and do 3. So this is a tea that's pre-measured to be 4 grams. Yeah, 4 grams, and the timing is going to be 2 minutes. So we have a water tower that's preset. One of them is preset for 175. And so that's why we go ahead and dissipate and aerate the water. Whether yours kettle is set for 170 or 175, you should still go through the process of aerating and dissipating. And why would you do that? You do that because when you do that, you brighten the flavor. This tea has really good flavor, and if you get that full brightness out of it, it's amazing. If you use higher temperature, you will flatten the flavor. And you notice Tea Master is using tea room, not in a hurry, just steady, paying attention to details. And for those of you who've been on the sessions for a long time, you know the value of this. Feeling the cups, see if she's close to where she wants to be in terms of the temperature.
Are tea toys always clay or are they ever stone?
You have both. So the question was, are tea toys always clay or can they be stone? They can be both. They can absolutely be both. You see them more often as clay, much more often as clay, but that doesn't mean that you can't have them as stone. And we've actually seen some tea toys as stone. So Tea Master already dissipated the water. Why'd she pour it into this pot? Because it has a spout on it and she can control the pour. So she's attempting not to pour directly on the leaves, but to kind of pour in, around, and under the leaves. And again, this is so you don't scald the leaves. The timer is set for 2 minutes. And you notice, well, you're going to notice something here in a minute. So in a minute, I'll show you exactly what you're going to notice. And you make sure you heat the recipient cup. So when you look at this, take a look of how this all sits here. It's almost all at the top. There's a portion underneath that is actually getting soaking. There's a portion at the top that isn't. this is good because you're going to get 3 good cups out of this. And the reason you're going to get 3 good cups is because it'll rotate as you put water in the second time. There'll be leaves that didn't exude the flavor as much the first time, and they'll keep that flavor up and going strong. So all of these are by grade, and this is a superior grade. Obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be called jewel, right? And when you're thinking of grade with white tea, is grade equivalent to quality? No, that's not how they use the term. They use the term to really indicate what's picked with the bud. So this is a bud and a leaf, or a bud and 2 leaves. And so that grade is the white peony grade. Does that mean that this is less than Silvernail? No, it's not less than Silvernail. It's different from Silvernail, but this has predominantly, and you'll notice in yours, predominantly more buds than it does leaves. So that's the dominant, and this would be something called king white peony. Timer has gone off. Tea master pours the water out of the warming cup, recipient cup, and carefully, not in a hurry, separates the tea liquor from the tea leaves. Good. You notice there's always a nice steady rhythm. Let's take a look at this thing. Ah, there's color change in there. Oh my gosh. There's a bunch of white things in here. Did you throw dust in here? Oh, Tea Master says, no, no dust. Oh, wait a minute. As I look closely, that's hairs, trichomes to be precise. And these trichomes grow particularly thickly on the buds. Again, from nature's perspective, what's the purpose of trichomes? Trichomes, nature fills up with polyphenols. Polyphenols to bugs taste bad. So the bugs bite on that. Oh my gosh, I don't want this thing. Point, go somewhere else. So it's kind of a built-in, nature built-in insecticide. Insect discourager. Obviously, it's not an insecticide. Insect discourager, or protector of the plant. Now, as we further look, and by the way, as I said, they're filled with polyphenols. So from our perspective, these are the things we want. We don't want to get rid of these trichomes. These are absolutely the things that we want. All right, so let's go ahead and enter the quality arena. The quality arena, we look for a couple things first. As we take a sip, 170-degree sip, this isn't 200-degree inhalation. This you can actually sip some and get some on your tongue. That regulates what astringency is going to be on your tongue. You're looking for that. You're looking for, or any other part of your mouth, you're looking for aftertaste. And then you're looking for energy effect on you. And so energy effect is, it can make you calm, it can bring you to clarity, it can heat you up, it can cool you down. It's something that you identify as you're drinking through. So let's go ahead and enter the quality arena. So I'm making a judgment right away. I'm thinking about astringency. You have to have astringency. Why? Because if you don't have astringency, you don't have any polyphenols in this tea. If you don't have polyphenols in this beverage, it's not tea. All tea has polyphenols in it. So it's got to register in your mouth. Now, again, because we're genomically different, it can register differently. So it can register on the roof of the mouth, the tip of the tongue, back of the mouth. All of these things are possible. but they must happen. I get a slight aftertaste here. And by the way, for those of you who are new on the broadcast today, you notice I'm not telling you what that aftertaste is, and you notice I'm not telling you the flavor or aroma profile. That's your job. In a minute, when you brew with the tea master, you're going to tell me what it is that you are tasting, and I'll comment on those observations. So, because I have no self-control, I'm going to take a second sip of this. And on the second sip, I'm going to think about aroma. I'm going to validate that the levels of astringency are where they are in my mouth. And then I'm going to think also about flavor, so that you don't do anything. You watch. This is what I'm going to do. Okay, so I'm making a judgment. If I had normally, so, okay, when I'm in China, when Bijou and I are in China and we're tasting multiple teas side by side, I always have a notebook and I'm taking notes. How do I know, how does she and I both know how to create the large cup? Because typically we're not drinking a large cup in China. We're being served in a very small quantity, because we take copious notes and come back and compare those and say, here are the flavors that must exist in the large cup. If they don't exist in the large cup, we've done something wrong. And so this is why taking notes is helpful to you. All right, so I've talked enough. It's time for you to brew with the tea master. Make sure your tableau is set up correctly. And again, we're going to aim for 170-degree water. And again, whether you cool it down, no matter what, you're going to try and aerate it, because that brings out a brighter flavor. And when you heat up the cups, which is the first thing that the tea master is doing, she's heating up the cups. You can use any temperature of water between 170 and 212. Does not matter, because again, you're just trying to apply heat. Once you start in the rhythm of trying to prepare for actual brewing, then it's important to use 170, no more than 175-degree water. You make sure that your leaves are prepared and ready, and that your timer is set for 2 minutes. Remember, you're going to get 3 great brews from this tea. And once you taste the first cup, you're going to say, oh my gosh, don't throw out those tea leaves. Don't touch those tea leaves to anybody else who comes in, because you're going to know, I can get a couple more cups.
One of the participant notes that the dry leaves smell like hay.
Great observation. Dry leaves smell like hay, and that is a good observation. White tea, especially some varietals, and this is again from fooding, and you'll notice when you look at those leaves, not the leaves as much as the buds, how fat they are. So there are characteristics of fooding versus Zhenghe. Zhenghe would be much thinner. Again, fat and thin don't affect the flavor. So good catch on the initial aroma of hay in the leaves.
Another participant comments the tea liquor has a lovely grounding weight at the back of the tongue.
Lovely grounding weight at the back of the tongue. Love this description. Why? Because this tea is not especially light, but it's not especially heavy. It's got a balance. And grounding is a perfect description of that. It comes across, and this grounding implies a couple things, by the way, which I really like about the use of that word in this context. It implies somehow that there's a relationship to calming as well, not just the sense of grounding. And love this opening description. So you put the water in, and again, all of yours should look like this, where this is beautiful configuration of tea on the top, just floating up there. And the aroma, I mean, I could be standing 5 feet away and I would smell this aroma. This thing is a big aroma. And one of the things to note when you're going through and thinking about aroma, thinking about taste, does aroma equal taste? And the answer to that is no. Sometimes, if it's an infused tea, the answer is it can be close. So jasmine that's heavily infused, yeah, that big aroma, there's some relationship. Yes.
Well, the participants ask, can you please talk briefly about the different grading of white tea again?
Yes. So the question is, how is white tea graded in China? And it's really broken down into 4 basic grades. Silver needle, so it's a bud grade. White peony, which is bud and 1 or 2 leaves. And this is king white peony because there's fewer leaves and more buds. You have spring tribute, and then you have Taoist eyebrows. The Taoist eyebrows has no buds. The spring tribute has an occasional bud, and it's much deeper into the pick. So that's it. And again, grades don't equal quality. Quality is a whole separate discussion point. And that's why when scholars translate Dengji to mean something related to quality, that's wrong. That's just simply wrong. It's really tight, but the proper or the in vogue English translation is great. So your timer should have gone off. You're separating the tea liquor from the tea leaves.
What
You're
is,
saving the leaves. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
apologies. Participant asks, what's the relationship between tea buds and tea leaves?
This is a great question. The relationship between tea buds and tea leaves. I love the fact that it's words buds, because it almost implies a friendship, a bud relationship. So what does a bud, when it sprouts, the first thing that comes up is this bud. And then over time, and by the way, this is in spring, and in this area, it can come up as early as mid-February. It's usually a little bit later. It's usually at the start of March, but some years it's as early as mid-February. And then as the bud starts to develop, the bud contains 5 leaves in it. So over time, 5 leaves will open up out of that bud. So hence, when you think of price, and this is really relative, and it's really important to understand, because didn't I just say this is king peony? Well, king peony has many more buds, which means that the farmer gave up the opportunity for 4 to 5 leaves. And that means volume. And therefore, you have to charge more for that, because that's what the farmer has given up. And if you further ask me, okay, well, why the heck should I pay a premium? Do buds, is there anything about buds aside from the fact that they have 4 or 5 more leaves in them? Well, yes, as it turns out, they have more L-theanine, they have more, a different proportion of polyphenols than individual leaves, a more intense proportion of polyphenol. It's all packed in that bud. And so therefore, there is something to be desired. The other thing is buds tend to bring a tenderer note to the tea. That sounds funny, a tender note to, I think that's the first time I've said that. What I really meant,
Not in the Scrabble dictionary.
not in the Scrabble, thank you, I appreciate that. What I really meant by that is there's some softness and sweetness associated with the buds. And you know this from green tea. When you get bud green tea, there tends to be a softness compared to when you have more leaves in there. More leaves give more body, more of a different type of flavor. So go ahead and enter the quality arena. So while you're thinking about this, again, this is from Fuding, and the most famous area in Fuding is called Mount Taimu. Mount Taimu is about 4,500 feet above sea level. It has this beautiful view of the ocean. So you get height, or elevation, I should say, and you get sea breezes, and you get stories. Oh my gosh, we have a story. I haven't done the story yet. So what's the legend of Mount Taimu? So there's a cave in Mount Taimu, famous cave. In fact, there's several of them, but there's a very famous one. And it's said that this old lady planted a blue tea bush in the cave. Where blue came from, no idea. Remember, this is a legend. So asking me to explain legends, don't do it. There's no explanation for me. And when this lady did it, and this lady was a farmer, local farmer, a Taoist immortal saw her do this and came and blessed her. And the long and short of it is she became a local Taoist legend. She passed away into immortality and became a legend. So why would I tell you this story? Because this cave really seems to exist and has seemed to exist for a long time. It's referred to in literature. There is and has been before tea/trees/bushes, not a lot, a few in this cave that have grown in the cave. And so it's taken on this legendary significance such that Chinese scientists in 1957 went to this cave and studied this one remaining tree, which was about 18 feet high. And it was dead, though. It was completely dead. Subsequently, somebody transplanted a live tree at some point in that cave. And there really just isn't, unless you believe, of course, that the spirits and the mortals, cause this thing to sprout, which I'm not going to encourage you to believe. It's more from my perspective, somebody transplanted a tree in there. So there is a tree in there, but it's alleged to be hundreds of years old. And you and I, because we come from scientific traditions, you can't have a dead tree and then all of a sudden a live tree without other things happening. So it's transplanted from someplace. It's certainly, when you look at it, it doesn't seem hundreds of years old. Yes.
What is the vintage of this tea?
This is last year. This is 2022 tea. So the question was, what is the vintage of this tea? So this is brand new. Well, brand new in the sense that it's a year old.
The tea liquor, a participant shares, the tea liquor has a smooth, round scent and feels smooth on my tongue. I can imagine becoming one with the fog if I sip this outside.
Tea liquor has smooth, round scent. The aroma makes me feel and imagine that, or makes the participant feel and imagine that they can hang out with fog or be part of a fog outside. In other words, okay, let's back up a minute. I interpret this to mean that this, and it's really well said after the grounding comment. I interpret this to mean that grounding with nature, grounding with the environment, making you feel at one with the environment.
And he also says smooth on the tongue.
Smooth on the tongue. absolutely, this thing just rolls around there, and it almost is so smooth. And this is what people who drink Liptons and go to the milk and sugar places and get something called, I don't even know what they call it there. It goes under the name, I think, of tea. People don't understand what real tea can be until you taste this great of it. Yes.
Another participant says, I'm having a difficult time drinking this at tea rhythm. I taste the sweetness and the softness. It's refreshing.
I love this comment. This is absolutely a great comment. This participant says, and I can really identify this because I have a lack of self-control. This participant says, really hard to drink this with tea rhythm. Sweet, round, smooth, and refreshing. Which actually, just like me, you see, I'm trying to use tea rhythm, but I am drinking through this fairly fast. And if I weren't talking to you, I'd have already been done with this cup. Not very good tea rhythm. Yes.
Another participant shares, I'm really enjoying this tea. It's hard for me to characterize the flavor or aroma. It's the feel of the tea that's so comforting. It's very easy to drink.
Love this comment. Easy to drink, hard to describe. Certainly the comfort of it is easy. The groundingness is easy. But trying to attach names to the flavor or aroma, not so easy. And this is really a good comment because some teas stand out and on your tongue signal to your brain, it's this flavor or that flavor. And you are able to give a distinct answer to what is the aroma / flavor profile. This is truly more about a feeling and less about a distinctive flavor. On the other hand, if I compared it to another tea, then you'd be saying, oh yeah, there is a distinctive. Even if I compared it to another white tea, you would know, oh yes, this does taste different. And then you'd be forced to try and put your arms around what is that difference. Yes.
Another participant shares, the aroma of the liquor has a light floral hint that stays in as an aftertaste. So a transition from the aroma to an aftertaste after the first sip. She also comments, it's smooth, almost slippery in the mouth.
Smooth, slippery in the mouth is the commentary from this participant. And that is at the back end of an aroma translating into
a light floral aftertaste.
A light floral aftertaste. I love this comment. This is subtle. And unlike the other teas, say a cliff tea, where there's nothing ever subtle about a cliff tea, this you have to work at. This is not, I'm going to give myself up for free. No, this is what I will signify as a tea is that, hey, I'm going to make you feel calm. I'm going to make you feel relaxed. But in terms of trying to capture why is it and what is it that I am really tasting, I like the fact you identified both sweetness and then that light florals and aftertaste. The sweetness is clearly there. And yet the groundingness of it takes place right away. And that's why one has to kind of go deeply in this before they really get that sweetness. Yes.
Another participant says, I feel the lingering effects at the tip of my tongue and the inside of my cheeks. And then there's this long lasting sensation that leaves like a juicy, light, calming, that leaves a juiciness. It's light, it's calming, there are hints of sweet floral smell. So back at the beginning, some sort of lingering effect at the top of the tongue and inside of cheeks.
All right, so this participant has a great panoramic comment, and it opens up with a lingering
Effect of some kind.
effect of some kind on the tip of the tongue and the sides of the cheek. And then morphs into
Juiciness, lasting juiciness.
lasting juiciness and a light, sweet, floral aftertaste. And I like, again, the panorama of this comment. I like the scope of this comment because there is a lot going on. And again, until you slow yourself down, it's hard because it's so easy to drink. It's hard to really get what you just said right away. And it takes that being in the tea rhythm to really get into this way. And actually, this shows you why this tea act is so famed in China. Those among white tea drinkers, this tea, this Fujian kingpin, is at the top of the pot because it's got sweetness of silver needle, but then it's got some grounding depth that the silver needle sometimes doesn't reach that level of grounding, and that's because there's some leaves in this as well. So that's why I said earlier about the grade. Grade and quality are two different things, and we have individual preferences. For those who like more of a thickness to mouthfeel, wow, this is great. For those who like a little thinness, and thinness isn't bad, silver needle, especially perhaps the Junghook, is great. So this is giving you white tea context, and that's what we're really doing this morning. Yes.
Another participant shares, after struggling to name a flavor or aroma, I've come up with a juicy Asian pear.
I like this. Juicy Asian pear. So the commentator, instead of trying to parse out a single aroma or a single flavor, gives me a feeling. And I love that sense of a feeling because think about the first time you ever ate an Asian pear. That juiciness right away, fresh, juicy, and then the aftertaste, hey, this is sweet. And then a little hint or a tease of floralness. Great comment.
Another participant shares very light dryness in the aftertaste.
Light dryness in the aftertaste. Yes, this dryness accumulates over time. I noticed for my palate, it was also light right in the beginning. But now that I've taken several sips, that dryness has really accumulated. And for me, it's mid-tongue. It is also side tongue, midway through.
Any food pairing suggestions?
So the wonderful thing about this tea is, again, on the surface, it seems like, yeah, this is different from a cliff tea. That would be true. But the wonderful thing about this is you could successfully pair this with nearly any food. Why? Because this will cover up the flavor of almost any other flavor. Don't eat anything that's hugely spicy. It's not going to cover up a Sichuan meal. That will not happen. But short of that, if you're having a steak, for example, you could easily drink this after having a steak, and this would be the predominant flavor. If you're having dessert, this is a great counterbalance to intensity of a dessert. So this tea, particularly this particular one, has great ability to influence what you end up tasting. Yeah.
Does Jewel come in cake or loose leaf form?
Jewel, the question is it a cake or is it loose leaf form? And it comes in loose leaf. All right. Oh my gosh. Right on the money. Loved sharing Jewel with you today. And I salute all of you who commented today because all of you added to the vocabulary of how to understand this tea. Not only the vocabulary of how to understand it, but a vocabulary which talked about energetics, which talked about subtlety, and a vocabulary which talked about calming and groundedness. Really an interesting and very good way to describe this tea. And that was all of you. I really appreciate those comments. So next week, you know, we had Jewel today. This is a beautiful, beautiful tea. You know, we better augment that beauty. We better find a tapestry of stuff to augment that jewel. Oh, wait a minute. That's what we're going to do next week. Green tea called tapestry. Your responsibility this week, stay safe. Holidays are upon us. Really look forward to seeing everybody next week. Bye-bye now.
There.
Bye.